It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the Coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in the control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, though, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day, folks, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. It's the 14th of May, 2026. It's episode 156. And joining me, as usual, is Hong Kong Jack. G'day, mate. How are you?
I'm well.
Budget week this week. First impressions?
First impressions, I would say the Prime Minister decided to be Malcolm Fraser, and the Treasurer was content to be Frank Crean rather than Paul Keating.
Okay, well, we've got love a little historical allusions. What if it's not a reform budget? What is it?
It's just a drift along budget with a few nice tweaks. I mean, I don't think it's a bad budget. I just think it was a wasted opportunity. But
we have had in the housing market, at least, and certainly handed down from the Howard years, negative gearing, the CGT discount, and a tax rise on family and discretionary trust, Jack. So those are fairly significant reforms, aren't they? Gone in one night. People had said that they would never go. And, of course, Labor lost an election pretty much trying to, in the shortened period in 2019, lost an election trying to prosecute these reforms.
Bill Shorten's probably still grumbling about it, I think.
Well, he was on 7:30 last night. We'll get to that. And we'll get to that in relation to broken promises and what have you. I mean, but those are fairly significant reforms. We do have one of your bugbears, of course, is that productivity is running about 1.5%, but it is up. But that's from some fairly desultory numbers over the last 10 years. One of the issues around the budget that I'm really struggling to get my head around, and so Treasury has forecast that inflation will peak in the second quarter of this year, which we're in right now, so around about June, maybe July, that the CPI will rise to around 5%, and that's in lockstep with the bank forecasters, with the ARB. To a degree, there are some variations, and then, as with the ARB, Treasury has predicted inflation to be at 2.5 by this time next year, and I'm finding that hard to believe. I mean, there's just so much that can go wrong, and of course we're talking about this while the Iranian war is still on, and the Strait of Hormuz is still blocked, and there appears to be zero movement to free it up. I mean, there have been attempts, but they're not working. So that's the thing for me that is a major problem. Now, you could say it's out of the government's hands what's going on in the Persian Gulf, but we cannot know what it will be. But right now we've got a fuel crisis around the world. That's only going to get worse. We've got the supply of goods, particularly chemical fertilisers, that is being restricted. Indeed, some nitrogen-based plants in the Middle East have closed down altogether, been shuttered while this goes on. And these things, while they might not cause severe hunger in Australia, they're going to have a massive impact on spending and on the cost of goods.
Yeah, this becomes, in a country like Australia, it becomes a price factor. Can I just say one of my favourite commenters had this to say. No amount of government-promoted cross-generation ruckuses will help once the hard, enduring pain of a high inflationary environment pervades the economy.
I know those words.
Yes, I think you probably would because you wrote them.
Yeah.
Can I just add this? You can't build a successful country on low growth, low productivity, high tax, high welfare, high inflation, and heavy regulations. No, those things just don't work. And that's the lesson to be learnt from the stagflation era, that some governments will have the courage to take this on and build something better. This one could. I just don't think it has quite grasped the nettle.
And where should they be? I mean, look, we talked about the complications around productivity, but the only way to stop stagflation is economic growth, and that's particularly difficult if the world you're in is in negative or tepid economic growth itself. I guess what I'm saying is that external factors are very much going to govern whether this budget is successful or not. And whether the economy in Australia returns to its rosy days of inflation within the ARB's belt, and I'm just really not seeing it, Jack. You know, I talked about a lot in that article about fertilisers and what it's going to mean to global food production. And those things are happening right now with impacts to be felt 3 months, 4 months, 5 months down the track. What I'm saying is if this is not resolved in 3 months' time, those consequences will double. And by at least by Christmas, we will have, there's a very strong chance that we'll be looking at sort of double-digit type inflation. Certainly,
Yes.
I'm not buying the 5% either, by the way, but I'm certainly not buying the 2.5 in June of 2027. And again, it's in sort of more or less lockstep. I think the ANZ says it won't be down under 3 next year. But I'm just not buying that at all. And clearly the assumptions the Treasury has made, like the ARB has made, is that the Iranian war will be over and the Strait of Hormuz will be cleared. And I'm just not seeing anything that would make me feel that optimistic about that, Jack.
Well, I'm more optimistic about that than you are, and let's not go into the weeds on that, but I am. But even if you accept their parameters that that's going to be resolved, this is a budget that just falls short of taking the actions that are needed to prevent us drifting along in stagflation, which you were talking about in your article yesterday.
We don't have those preconditions for stagflation. We should explain what stagflation is. Stagflation is a state where you have high unemployment, low economic growth, low and desultory economic growth, and high inflation.
Yeah.
Those are the three markers. Now, we've got one certainly in place, that's inflation, but our unemployment figures
are not bad.
Not bad, and according to Treasury forecasts, we'll sit around 5% next year. So that's the one element that's not there at the moment. But that can change really
Pretty quickly.
in a moment while the preconditions, the economic preconditions remain as they are around the Persian Gulf. And something that's often ignored is just the contribution Ukraine's made to global food production. And I just looked at some of their facts, some of their agricultural facts. They're now importing chemical fertilisers where once they made them by one of the great providers of the world, manufacturers of the world, and their crop yields are down by 25%.
Yes.
So there's a sort of double whammy there going on.
But so far as stagflation is concerned, we're not isolated from the rest of the world, and it's pretty much already in existence in Europe, stagflation, and we're not going to be all that far behind them if we don't change direction. And this is a budget, I think, that doesn't quite get there. The best thing they did was to say, we're going to reduce regulation. That's the easiest way to get productivity going, right? Is to make things easier to do. But it was a small cut. They need to be bold. I mean, countries have faced this before. This is not new science. If you go back to what was it, the late 80s in Ireland, they were moribund. The young Irish were living in huge rates. So what did they do? They cut taxes, they cut regulations, they opened up the economy, and they got to a pretty consistent 4%, 5% growth, and it became the Celtic Tiger, right? But it required bold efforts. I mean, the Hawke Keating government was bold. Thatcher was bold. Reagan was bold, right? And that's what got us out of the last lot of stagflation. And I think that's what we need now. And this budget sort of had a little bit of a go.
Reagan just injected a vast amount of debt, a vast amount of public debt through tax cuts, essentially, through the old trickle-down tax cuts, and set in train, really, America's very perilous journey towards, unmanageable debt, which has got a lot worse since Trump began his second term. I get where you're going, Jack, but at the same time, there's a $38 billion cut to the NDIS. We've talked about this on the program a number of times. That seems to me to be a very optimistic figure too. We know that overall there are small savings to the budget bottom line, but we are still looking at $1 trillion of debt, Commonwealth debt. But this NDIS a cut of $38 billion, 37.8 to be specific. I don't know whether they'll be able to hit that target. That's the first one. It's the first thing I'd say about that. But when you want to talk about productivity, getting people with disabilities back into the workforce is one area that needs to be worked on. And while cutting the NDIS is not likely to achieve any of those sorts of outcomes.
What they're talking about doing is cutting the NDIS targets. What really needs to happen with the NDIS is it needs to be rethought and reimagined as to eligibility and whether it offers a pathway, as you say, quite correctly.
Well, there'll be 160,000 fewer participants on the scheme by 2030.
But they haven't really got a pathway to get there. And the only way...
I fully accept that, but what I'm saying is...
This is just a target. This is just a target. We're going to have 160,000 fewer beneficiaries. What they're not saying is we're going to reimagine the NDIS. We're going to redesign it so that it encourages, as you correctly say, people to get back from not working at all and having support to at least participating in the workforce.
Yeah,
and it rethinks who is actually eligible for what care and what sort of care they're eligible for. And until they do that, all they're doing is fiddling with the targets.
Yeah, so they've got growth in the NDIS. Spending will be capped at 2%. I'm not sure whether that's indexed or not, but 2%, and 160,000 fewer participants in the scheme within 4 years. And when we talk about productivity, that is one case. Now, housing is another case, Jack, and that has impacts on productivity, but it also speaks of a sort of vast chasm between people in their 40s, 30s and 20s and those now sort of entering, who have been in middle age, the boom of the so-called baby boomers. I gather that there's this sort of intergenerational pitch going on. It's a pitch to people in that sort of under 50 years of age, and the work is also designed to perhaps pit that group, let's say 18 to 50 years old, against the other group presumed to be asset rich, particularly in housing, who are 50 or older. And generally speaking, fair bit older than that. The politics of that, Jack, for a start, we know the numbers are on the government side. in terms of just sheer votes. But there has been, and we've talked about it on a number of occasions, there is a housing crisis in this country. And I looked at the figures over the last 30 years, over the last 50 years. Home ownership for those in their 20s is down almost 20%. Housing ownership for those in their 30s, compared just with the last 30 years, with, let's say, 1995, is down 16%. And then when we get to the 40s, it's down by 15%, compared with what housing ownership rates were in 1995. So that tells us that we've got a problem. But does this budget actually fix this? There's a design there to bring 47,000 homes that are currently under investment back onto the market. Firstly, have they got the politics right on housing? And have they got the policy right on housing?
The politics are tricky. I get that the numbers have shifted, that we boomers are now no longer, for the first time in our lifetime, are no longer the majority. But I'm not sure how that's going to play out. Policy-wise, I don't think the moves were in the wrong direction. Part of this is kind of historical. Tax-wise, the best investments Australians have been able to make for a long time have been into the family home and into superannuation. That means that this is one of the reasons why I think we have overvalued family homes, because everyone pulls their money into there because there's a tax advantage in doing so. It's no longer just a place to live; it's a place to park your assets.
A place to build assets,
Yeah.
and also then acquire another one, which is housing, and enjoy lots of tax benefits from negative gearing, and if the place is sold from the CGT discount.
Yes, correct.
But one thing that has done is driven supply.
Yes.
And will these changes reduce that rate of supply? I think that's one of the things that we're not sure of.
No, and I read various opinions on this, and I'm afraid I don't have a fixed view on it just yet.
Alan Kohler is probably the best one to listen to on housing. He wrote the quarterly essay on it a while back, and he's looked at it every which way. I'm not sure that what is going to happen in this budget. All of it's grandfathered, of course. So negative gearing on all properties acquired after July 2027 that are not new properties will have no negative gearing attached to them, and then the CGT discount goes at the same time, and then in 2028. The taxes on family trusts will kick in as well. Those things are very politically difficult for any opposition to sort of argue, I think, in the current environment, Jack. And it just looks like, I saw the opposition Treasury spokesman, young Tim there, he was all over the shop, mate. He just sounded lazy to me. He didn't understand what I just spelled out about the grandfathering elements. He seemed to have just brushed over on that, because what goes on in July 2027 with this forecast of a 2.5% CPI rate is a tax cut to the value of $250 for all salaried employees, and look, any wage earners, I suppose, and that alone is a pretty awful trade-off. As I say, while we live in a high inflationary environment, the government's obviously decided we can't give it away now because that'll just fuel. We can't give it away 1 July 2026 in tax returns. So we're going to have to wait a year, and that's a sort of a nod to the Reserve Bank in some ways, who've been talking about government spending, fueling inflation. But simple fact is you'll get your $250 tax cut after bearing what could easily be 5, 6, 7% inflation, if not higher. So you're going to have a lot of pain, and maybe you'll get a little bit back, but I suspect that sort of $5 a week tax cut's not going to. They won't be dancing in the streets. Put it that way.
I thought the $5 a week tax cut was easily the weakest part of the budget. I couldn't see why they were doing it.
Well, I can tell you why, Jack. Politically, they say, well, okay, do you support these tax cuts to the opposition and to One Nation? Do you support them? And if you don't support them, you want to come up with a bloody good reason why. Otherwise, you do leave yourself vulnerable. And this, in fact, happened in the 2025 election when Chalmers had laid out tax cuts which the opposition wouldn't support, and they copped a lot of flack on that. So there's definitely some politics going on there. Well, let's just go through to
what's a $5 a week buy you now? Does it even buy you a beer?
No, it won't buy you a beer, mate. You might find a skewy at the Razzle, but of course, I think it was Amanda Vanston who coined the phrase ham sandwich and a milkshake tax cut.
Where do we used to have a beer occasionally? The Phoenix, the Bat and Ball. Would it buy you a small beer in either of those places?
You might get a pony. You might get a pony. Yeah, I mean, but it's not even a ham sandwich and a milkshake. I don't think you can get a ham sandwich anywhere for $5 these days, mate. So yeah, I mean, I don't know.
The CWA still at the show. That would be about it. You know.
Let's talk about the politics of it, because there is a lot of talk of intergenerational failures and particularly around housing, Jack. Cos Samaras has been running these lines for a long time. As we know, the millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, who are in the business of giving their votes, now outnumber boomers, and I think it's the silent generation. There's still a few of them around too, and so they, any sensible government will be looking at these sorts of people. Samaras made a really good point too about migration and selling this business of lower migration, particularly the coalition's policy, that the Indian diaspora in this country has just passed the other diasporas. The main one, of course, is the English in this country. And he said also that the average age of the English or British diaspora is 56. The average age of the Indian diaspora is, I think, something like 37, 38, off the top of my head. So you're playing to, essentially, Labor is trying to play to the emerging majority based on age, and it sort of leaves the coalition. I'm going to talk about, they get some opportunities from this budget. Taylor's budget in reply will be watched by some, not many, tonight. It defines them. It defines their role really in a way that they will appeal to an older demographic based on economic management and so forth. So, firstly, has the coalition got any economic credentials left?
Very few.
And how do they work? I guess what is the tradition? When we look at the demographic breakdown, so 65 pluses, they're the only ones who continue to support the coalition over Labor. But I think even that's diminished now with the rise of One Nation.
That's where they stand at the moment. They're not locked into being stuck there.
No, of course not. But
and as you pointed out earlier, and in your piece in the paper in the Australian, the sort of economic headwinds that we are facing, that all the rest of the world is facing as well, can change political dynamics pretty quickly because governments become unpopular very quickly if this happens.
Well, I guess that was the essential point. If you lose control of inflation, regardless of what's going on around the rest of the world, the government of the day will wear the blame for that. And they wear the blame not just when a polling company gives you a bell and asks you who you're going to vote for. They wear it every time someone taps their card on the little screen and they go, look at the price of that. So these are really not just potentially drive you out of government, but the pain becomes real and is constantly being imprinted on people every time they go to a point of sale.
Yes. So if you're looking at what you would do if you were the opposition now, you would be saying, look, our economic credibility's taken a huge hit because the end result of all those years of Liberal rule wasn't all that good. And Scott Morrison in particular made the place a bit of a shambles, right? We didn't understand how big a shambles until after they lost the election, but it was a shambles. So we're going to pay a cost for that. At the moment, we're limited in what we can argue, but what we can do is we can set up, because we can set ourselves up in a way so that if we do go back to a high inflation, stagflation era, we're going to look okay and we're going to look like a reasonable alternative to voters who are unhappy with the current government.
Yeah, we'll get to sort of One Nation as we go. I get the feeling that there's not a lot of people listening at the moment, and no amount of grandstanding is going to change that.
No, but you have to do the work now. Who's I think it was Clinton Crosby's old saying is you don't fatten a pig on, you can't fatten a pig on market day. You've actually got to put the work in now, even though no one's listening. Yeah.
My view on what the opposition should be doing is they should be hunkered down. Yes, he's got a budget in reply and he can do whatever he likes tonight. There won't be much by way of black letter policy. But, let's put that aside for a minute. They should be head down, bum up, just working on economic policy. Avoiding microphones wherever they can.
Well, calling out where you think the government's either in error or not quite got it right. But yes, head down. It takes a lot of work. I mean, and the budget in reply thing, I don't know why anyone listens to it. You have a budget that takes months in preparation, and the opposition gets a day to respond. Well, it's not going to be quite the same thing, is it? Really?
It was probably written substantially before Tuesday.
Yes, yeah. So he'll be out there tonight. His job is to go out there tonight and try and knock a couple of political points over that will slightly embarrass the government. That's all he's meant to do, right?
What about the broken promise?
And no one will listen to it anyway, right?
Well, we talked about negative gearing, CGT trusts, hand on heart. Last election, Albo said wasn't going to happen. Chalmers did the same. There were a number of others who did, and now they've and clearly they have changed their minds. Are they going to wear a lot of this? Are they going to wear an electoral backlash for this?
Oh, I don't know whether you saw the morning television. I've never seen the Prime Minister look that uncomfortable about anything before.
Well, they had their lines. They had their lines ready. I mean,
they didn't put them over well, You
might remember the 2014 budget, 2014, 2015, I'm thinking, the budget, Joe Hockey's first budget under the Abbott government. And they broke a lot of promises that they pledged to the electorate. And the worst thing they did was not own up to it. That they kept on pretending that it wasn't a broken promise and all this sort of stuff. And that's what gets people really cross. I think people will, this is largely a media-driven exercise, right? So but I think people understand that governments have to change positions according to shifting circumstances. And so if you're Albanese or Jim Chalmers, you have to accept it, own the broken promise, and provide the rationale for it. Whether that's going to be accepted or not is another matter, but that's how you deal with a broken promise in politics. You don't pretend it hasn't happened. That's the worst thing you can do.
And I gave them about, from what I saw, and I watched a bit of this because I quite enjoyed it. I gave them about a 4 out of 10 for that.
Chalmers has been a lot better, to be honest, and he's got some prepared lines, and he'll answer the question directly in a couple of sentences, and then he'll move on to his.
Okay. An average of 4. Elbow gets 3.5, and Chalmers gets 4.5. The bit that most amused me was watching the Prime Minister being interviewed by Matt Shirvington. I can't remember which morning show he's on. Right?
Oh, it's a Channel 7 one.
Channel
I think it's a sort of morning tea show, but I may be wrong.
Yeah,
pay much attention to these.
But you would have thought that Mr. Albanese was being eviscerated by Richard Carlton, and I've always thought of Matt Shirvington as an amiable breakfast television chap rather than someone
else. It couldn't have been a morning tea show, so it must have been a breakfast
TV show. Yeah, but look, of course they're going to wear a bit of flack on that, but that's a 4-day news story.
It is, but you've got to handle it the right way, otherwise it continues to bleed. And that was my point. That Hockey and Abbott back in 2014, they continued to sort of prosecute this line that they weren't lying. It was all a bit of a misunderstanding, and and that's the worst thing you can do. So the first thing you got to do is say, yes, we own it, we accept it, that the position that we took into the last federal election is not the position we hold now. And then you need to provide the rationale, and the rationale is changing circumstances. We needed to act now. I was quite interested to hear that Chalmers had declared that basically the negative gearing package, the CGT, the tax on trust, that was very late into the budget. That they had been working on these things, but they had made no decision. I gather from Chalmers the decision finally was made in the last month. And there would have been some politicking going on there. But, with Albanese, there's always the tell, right? He's not a very good liar. The best liar in politics I've seen is Scott Morrison. He'd just look down the barrel of a camera and tell you a lie, and no tell. Nothing, no eyes going side, no touching of the face, nothing like that. He will stare at you and lie to you. It's generally a hard thing to do, but lie directly to someone's face. And in the case of political figures, to the nation, and there's generally always a tell. You'd see it with Malcolm Turnbull, you'd see it with others. The eyes would go dart around a little bit, the head would go down a little bit, or might go up. There's always the tell. And Albo's got some of the worst tells you've ever seen. He does. The eyes dart around a lot, and he really starts stammering. Have you ever seen? He starts stuttering and stammering a bit. So that's when he's uncomfortable with being presented with the fact that he's not always a dyed-in-the-wool truth speaker.
Well, this is their problem. I think the people are reasonably forgiving if they believe that you've changed your mind. What they get cross about is that they think that if you weren't telling the truth at the time, that this was the plan all along, right? That you would say this to get elected and then change your mind. Now, when they start believing that, then you've got a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, it was very interesting. 7:30, I think, ABC 7:30, Sarah Ferguson hosted Shorten and Chris Pine. And They're both really good talent these days. Pine more so than Shorten, I would say. But it was Pine who said, look, we got it terribly wrong in 2014. We kept trying to tell people they weren't being lied to, they hadn't been lied to, and really it was just a trick of their memory. And he said we suffered very badly for that. And that's the lesson from it. Own the lie, explain, provide the rationale in a couple of short lines, and maybe you'll escape a fair bit of thumping. Cos Samaras, Jack, of course, we love to hear from Cos, demographer to the stars. He said tonight Labor chose a side, well, a generation to be honest. 3 reforms serious economists call politically impossible for 20 years, negative gearing, capital gains, family trusts landed in one night. They landed for a reason. They landed for the 7,000 additional millennial migrant enrolments and Gen Z voters who will be on the electorate roll by the next election, and only 1 in 5 of whom consider themselves coalition voters on a good day with the sun shining. I am being very kind. I could go on. So at least Cos thinks they've got the politics right for the right demographics, for the demographics that will win them elections.
He's the other thing he rabbits on about in demographics all the time is particularly the Chinese and the Indian diaspora, and how he thinks that and indeed at the moment they do poll much less in favour of the coalition than the general community, than their peers at the same age groups, etc., etc. He seems to think that's locked in forever, and my experience of watching diaspora groups over time would doubt that. The Indians in particular are socially conservative, aspirational. At the moment, they're very pro-Labor, but there's an awful lot of reasons why that could change, and I watched that happen with the Greeks, the Italians, all that kind of stuff.
Right? I agree with that too, Jack. But when we are looking at, let's just look at the Chinese diaspora. When we are looking at an opposition seeking to win the support of those people, they've come up with an immigration. We wouldn't call it a policy. It's not. It's a kind of a statement, really, a statement of intent. And when they talk about people who, that the option in migration will be to select those people who have come from Western democracies over those who haven't, then you're looking at the Chinese diaspora, the Vietnamese diaspora. I could go on. African diasporas here, there, and everywhere. The Middle East, etc. They've pretty much excluded those people, and they continue to do so. For the life of me, I don't understand it. I mean, Chris Pine did and make another really good point that the Liberal Party needs to ignore One Nation, leave them to their own devices, and keep plugging away at the centre. And they're not doing that at the moment.
Well, that's what I would do. I mean, I've got to say, I wouldn't be. The biggest mistake is I think is to take somebody else as the star or as the fixed point, and everything you do revolves around them. That's always an error. What you do is you look at what you should be doing. This is what the Dems do with Donald Trump in America. Everything they do is revolves around what did he say.
Well,
right?
I mean, you might understand it with the Dems because he's in government. One Nation are an aspirational party looking for hopefully to pick up, a third of the 50 plus years of age electorate. That's what they're looking for. They're not a government in waiting. They'll never be a government.
No.
So why are the Liberal and it's the Nationals? I mean, if we saw, we'll get to Farrah in a moment. If we saw the sort of poll results as we saw in Farrah, which is a by-election, yes, and you'll get stranger than normal results there. The Nationals, they're on the verge of a wipeout.
Yeah, just before we leave the Cos Samaras and the Indian, the Chinese diaspora things, you're absolutely right about what the coalition is getting wrong at the moment, right? But that's easily fixed. It takes some work.
Jack. Those are significant areas of trust.
Yeah, it takes some work to fix it, but over time you can fix it. It's not an insurmountable problem. But I still have the problem with him that I think that over time, particularly those two groups, won't be as stuck with Labor as he thinks they are.
Well, I remember on the campaign trail, Phil Ruddock was walking down the street of, I think, Newport, Northern Beaches anyway. And obviously, Philip Ruddock's been out of federal politics for a long time. So what are we talking about? I'm going to say about 2004. And I remember as he walked down the shopping strip, people would come out of the stores and come up on the footpath and just greet him. And these were people, they were Chinese people, there were people from all different ethnic backgrounds, and he knew them, right? He knew them. He might not have known them by name, but he knew the faces. He knew they'd spoken to them before. He'd done the work, Jack.
Yes.
And I just don't see any of that happening at the moment.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Philip Ruddock was very, very popular in the ethnic communities. Right? I mean, it didn't get a lot of,
but it was through hard work, Jack.
Yeah, it didn't get a lot of publicity but I knew that at the time. I can tell you.
Well, I was quite amazed to see how many people, Chinese backgrounds in particular, would come out and meet him. Mr. Ruddock, it's good to see you. Yes, he'd say, it's great to see you. Very, very good. I just don't see that happening, when I look at seats like Parramatta and John Howard's old seat, just struggling to come up with the name, for example. None of that work's been put in.
No, and you have to put it in. Right? Yeah. But as I said before, you can't fatten the pig on market day. You've got to start working on that now.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, by-elections, as we predicted, Jack, One Nation have won the seat, probably more so than we did. Remember, we did look at a poll that we weren't quite sure of the veracity of. It was a YouGov poll, but a private one, so it wasn't published in any of the news sites, etc. And that gave One Nation 40%. And I remember thinking, gee, that sounds a bit high. But they got 40. They got 40% of the primary vote. The so-called Teal Independent, I think we might be selling her a bit short by doing that. She got about 28%. And you could put a tea towel over the rest of them.
Yeah. Did you have a look at did you have a look at the
12? Sorry,
did you have a look at the winner?
Yeah, he's in Canberra today.
Yeah, this is kind of the area I grew up in, the other side of the river, but still below the Barassi line, so very similar to where I grew up. Farley looks to me like the sort of fella I would have expected to be a country party member back in my day, perhaps a Liberal if there was one of those quirky seats that was still Liberal, but probably a country party MP, right? He just looked straight out of...
They've been the Nationals for 50 years, but...
Well, I'm talking about when I was a kid, though. The country parties, right? That's what he looked like to me, and that's what he sounds like. His background is all like that. So at the moment, the coalition is so bereft that the people who are naturals for them are going, even as candidates, into One Nation, and they're probably pulling the sort of supporters that used to be natural coalition supporters with them.
Yeah. Oh, look, obviously it became clear that Mr. Farley had been sniffing around politics for a while. He had been, I think he'd been a Labor financial member of the Labor Party, and I think did tip his hat in for pre-selection in Farrah but was knocked back when Labor Party did some due diligence and found he said some rather appalling things about Julia Gillard. What that told me, Jack, firstly, is a bit of a breakaway, is that Labor do the vetting well, and the others don't, and One Nation are appalling at it. But yeah, look, he I guess the next question is, how long will he sit with the One Nation group? I mean, how long can you speak with Malcolm Roberts for before you start thinking you've taken a wrong turn in your life? And that's the thing, you know. If Farley says, you know, I'm going to go and sit in the crossbench, then it starts to look like deja vu all over again for One Nation, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's their problem, and it's a structural problem in the sense that what do you do? The jump from being a one-person party with a couple of hangers-on to being a serious political party is a hard one, because that one person wants to run it all her way.
Yeah, there was just a press conference where Farley was introduced in Canberra by Pauline, and she had to basically take it over. There's been some issues around Malcolm Roberts, who said he didn't have the data to figure out whether Bondi was a false flag or not. They've had to repudiate that today. It must be said, you know, One Nation have supported the Jewish community, certainly spoken about their support when it came to supporting legislation, getting rid of hate preachers and what have you. They ran a mile from that. But yes, there was, Roberts is a very, very strange human being. And he was asked a question: do you consider the Bondi attack last year a false flag attack, which would indicate that either some form of Israeli thing or Australian government were involved in this sort of thing? And he said he doubted it, but he had not seen the data. I don't know what he means by data. What's a polling data on what people thought? I don't know what he means, but this is part of his pitch that, I am data-driven and all this sort of stuff. This is a bloke who thinks that nearly 100,000 people were killed in Australia by the COVID vaccine. So and I think what happened today with the presser with Hanson is that more scrutiny is going to rattle them eventually, I think. But Pauline's not too smart on her feet. Ashby probably is the cunning one, but he can't be out there speaking on her behalf. And Joyce is probably pretty comfortable with the media too. But yeah, I still do think the One Nation rise is a temporary sort of thing. I think that they will sort of continue to poll around 15 to 20%. The New South Wales state election and the Victorian state election will tell us a fair bit more about that. But that's where I think they're going to go. And the Libs need to pick up that, you know, extra 10% back, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be enough. There were some pretty strange things. I did enjoy Amanda Vanston's comment on what the Liberal Party were looking into on Sunday morning after the by-election. Plenty of lessons in the Farrah result, she wrote. Here's just one. If you treat your leader like shell grit and undermine her from day one, don't expect her constituents of over 1/5 of century. Oh, okay, so yeah.
20 years.
Don't expect her constituents of 20 years to either respect or warm to you. Which is kind of right, isn't it? I mean, did Lay have a strong personal following? Well, certainly she was getting, she went to preferences pretty much often, but the only sort of threat to her, because the Nats didn't run, was, the occasional independent. But she was still getting 40% of the primary vote.
Yeah, I don't know how much her personal support was, but Vanstone makes a fair point. You know, I mean, that's how it is. The one thing I would say about how people deal with the rise in One Nation support, if you sneer at people and call them racists and bigots and ignorant, etc., they're never going to come back and vote for you.
Even though they are.
Well, you can say that, but if you do that, they will never come back. And when they're getting 40% of the vote, no, they are not. 40% of the people who live in that part of southern New South Wales are not racists or bigots or ignorant. They're just people.
Well, the bloke on the stage, when they announced the winner, the bloke on the One Nation stage is a man who's made social posts about in support of Desi Freeman, the now deceased cop killer, and some fairly fruity far right sort of comments as well, Jack. So
yes, there will be.
Look, I understand it's politically fraught, but you and I can at least call a spade a spade.
Well, I can call that individuals, but if you start telling 40% of the people who vote for a particular political party,
I wouldn't accept that.
Yeah,
but you would understand. Well, you
can do it. I mean, you must be free to be able to do that in Australia. But the moment you do it, you should know they'll never vote for your mob again.
Yeah, I understand. Well, I'm simply making the point that One Nation's members are for. That some of their members are some of the worst people in Australia. There's simply no doubt about that. And we can talk about, and we will be doing, by the way, listeners, our next show will be covering the Royal Commission into Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion. And there was some evidence gathered there today that shows on political affiliation that there is a strong anti-Semitic streak. A little bit in the Greens, certainly a very strong anti-Zionist streak in the Greens, but an equally strong anti-Semitic streak among One Nation supporters. All righty. What else do we have? Let's just go through the headline things, which I'm sure our listeners have heard a million times, but we'll just quickly go on them. As I say, the biggest problematic one for me was the inflation rate of 2.5%. in the second quarter of 2027. That seems highly optimistic. But some of those headline figures, if we want to just have a quick look at them, $833 billion budget in total. Savings improvements between 45 and 63 billion in bottom line gains. If you've got $63 billion to invest, you do get a chunk of change, and it's one of the reasons why the budget is in better shape than it would otherwise have been. We've been through the major reforms. $2 billion have been set aside for infrastructure, roads, utilities, etc. You're seeing a lot of these places, Jack. If you went for a drive south of Sydney, you would normally expect to find a fair bit of bare land between Picton and the Southern Highlands. That stuff's pretty much gone now, but there's nothing out there besides, there's roads and sewerage, kinda. But then, if you're looking for hospitals, you're looking for schools and things like that, they're not there. So there needs to, if you're going to keep expanding in housing, you're going to have to provide the services there, and that's always a bit of a catch-up.
It always has been, I might add.
Oh, they've never done it. They've never had the services there where you can say, okay, we'll build that one because it's next to a hospital. But you'll find it hard to believe, I think, just the extent of growth in that southwestern Sydney corridor. I used to drive what's called the Southern Road, and to take you into the Blue Mountains through Penrith from the Southern Highlands, and that used to be nothing. It's just nothing there, and now it's just housing estate after housing estate after housing estate, and there'll be an airport there, I think, in 2 years' time. So yeah, it's one of those things. Well, they've got their own airport. And so as I say, the critical one for me in terms of savings is this $36 to $38 billion saving on the NDIS, and just how that's going to be, and that will come with political pain. And it will, it'll be cast as heartless. I'm not saying the coalition or One Nation will be the ones who'll make, who will draw attention to that, but certainly the media will be on to that. Record spending in defence, Jack, $53 billion. And one of the notable things, we should devote a show to military or defence acquisitions in this country, because there's a long and unhappy history of it. and where they're going now. And there's more and more defence spending going outside defence acquisitions, Jack, if you know what I mean. Going outside that bureaucracy, looking at drones, looking at commercial providers of drones, etc., for one. So extra funding for health and hospitals, a lower net overseas migration forecast, tighter permanent visa rules. That's about it. Is there anything you want to say just to wrap up the budget, Jack?
Most of that's just numbers. The migration thing's a bit of a guess. The defence spending, it doesn't matter how much you spend, depends whether you spend it well. As you say, we can talk about that.
I think we need to move away, and I think the government is moving away from defence acquisitions the normal way, because they have a almost Nero-like ability to waste money. Just billions gone, and sort of a bit of a tap of the hands, and we'll move on to the next disaster. So we definitely need to do that. We should set aside a program, and we will, for defence acquisitions, and basically what our priorities should be.
Let's give plenty of notice. So if there's any bribery that people want to engage in, we can give them time to give our bank details. I want my share.
Yeah, so we are eminently bribable. All right, moving now on to the woes.
Not cheap. We don't come cheap. I just want to add.
Well, we are prepared to negotiate. Starmer, he's hanging on by his fingernails. There must be a few of them gone now. But of course, the result of the Scottish, Welsh and council elections, 136 English councils, Reform have gained 1,451 seats. Labor lost a little bit more than that. Tories lost 563. The Greens gained 441. And the Libs gained 155 seats. So between them, between the Labor and the Tories, they lost 2,500 seats. But the worst figure, obviously, is Labor with almost 1,500 seats lost.
And the other number that struck me with all of that is that there are 177 new what are called Muslim independent councillors. Right, that's up from less than 30 a year ago. So
in Scotland, the SNP won 58 seats with a 33% share of the vote. And in the previous 2021 Holyrood elections, they won 64 seats with 44% of the vote. So they're doing okay with by getting less, and that's because of Labor's disintegrating vote, Jack. And so all of this must be sheeted home to Starmer, surely.
No, not all of it, but enough of it.
I can't see too many other reasons for Labor's decline. We can talk about demographic shifts and all this sort of stuff, but really this is a government that wasn't ready to govern and has just bounced from disaster to disaster ever since.
Well, I can think of a few things. It's not just Starmer, but the things that the government are not even addressing, really. It's immigration, it's cost of living, it's the net zero stuff, driving electricity prices. There's a long list of things that people are unhappy about. He lacks judgment, I guess, more than anything else. But
I see what you mean. Look, he didn't lose 1,500 council seats on the basis of his support for Pete Mandelson. I get that. What I'm saying is that this is a government it's pretty much principally failed to provide any confidence in government around the world, in the UK. Now he's being hunted. That's obvious. Tell me who the candidates are, Jack, and tell me what you know about them.
As of this morning, it would seem that the candidate most likely is Wes Streeting, who's yet another Labor apparatchik. He may be opposed. The other person who has been talked up a lot is Andy Burnham, the mayor of Manchester, who's not actually in the Commons at the moment, which is a problem that would need to be solved. They would need to find a seat that he could, where they could persuade the member to resign, and that would be winnable in the current climate. And there won't be too many of those, right?
Worth remembering, of course, that there was a seat available in his own backyard, Jack.
And he was, which
and
he
the
may or
Labor
may not have
Council,
won.
under direction for Sir Keir Starmer, said, oh, no, well, we'll never find a mayoral candidate in time and can stay there. So he did.
So the most credible, they had a cabinet meeting 2 days ago, and there have been reasonably credible reports that what happened there was that that before that meeting, Starmer had been prepared to go, had been prepared to
Really?
make an arrangement that was satisfactory to nobody, but not unsatisfactory to too many. And he had discussions with his fellow ministers about that.
Hey, I think I can turn this around.
And one of them leaked that story that they were speaking about it to the media, and he got very, very angry. Went nuclear, it is said, on Shabina Mahmood, who was the one who was alleged to have leaked, and then decided, no, you're going to have to drag me out. So when they arrived for the cabinet meeting, thinking they were going to have a discussion about how could this be organised, he said, no, it's not even on the agenda. And if you want to talk to me about that, I'll only talk to you privately, one-on-one, and then refuse to be available. So it's kind of stalemated. But I guess that buys him a bit of time, but not much.
Not much. Yeah, look, Wes Streeting, what do we know about him? Currently Health Secretary, mid-40s, Labor man, been in the Commons for a while. What else do we know about him, Jack? He doesn't look to be. I'm certainly, when I heard him speak the other day, I didn't just feel like I wanted to jump out of the chair and run a marathon. He's not inspiring.
No, his time between university and the Commons was a lot of it was spent at an organisation called Labor Together, and the two people who mentored him there were Morgan McSweeney, the most recently sacked senior aide to the Prime Minister, and Peter Mandelson.
Yeah, so much depends on Burnham. And I know there's pushes on, and as you say, it's not going to be easy for someone to basically hand a seat over, and
to make sure it's winnable.
Like I say, the winnable seat was there as well. In this day and age, perhaps nothing's blue ribbon, but the winning seat was right there and in his backyard, and he would have romped home. And now he'd probably be Prime Minister. But that didn't take place. There was also an Australian got involved in all of this, Jack. Did you follow that?
Yeah, Catherine West. She's
Sydney-born.
Sydney-born. She's the sister of Michael West, the journalist who now has been for some years running his own website come news service. I think he used to work for The Australian, did he not?
Look, he's been around. Of course, he famously left the Fairfax media, or Nine media now, saying that he didn't want to be part of a business section of the newspaper that was just basically doing nothing but PR.
Yeah.
Look, Westy's a man of great integrity.
Well, Catherine West is a sister, and she decided that if no one was going to put their hand up and actually bring this on to a battle, that she would start the process. And the process is that you've got to get, I forget what the percentage is, but the number is 81 members to to sign a document saying that they will support you. And she was prepared to be the candidate
it triggers
as
a
a
spill.
stalking horse.
But it doesn't just trigger a spill within the party room, within the caucus. It basically triggers what the Labor has, its rank and file vote.
It does. Every time they've done this, Kevin Rudd tried to do it in Australia. It's a mess. It's just wrong. The Australian system where a couple of candidates walk into the party room and an hour and a half later, one of them walks out as Prime Minister and the other one's lost. That's much, much better. It's nasty, it's dirty, but it's clean.
The one that they do have in place now it is weighted. This is Labor without a U in the Australian Labor Party. And what they do with their federal leadership, and there's a spill as a matter of course once a position becomes vacant. So after Shorten left, there was a vote by the rank and file and there was a vote by the caucus, and the caucus is weighted more than the rank and file. And I think that sort of gives them an out. But in the UK, it's one in, all in. There's no weighting. So an MP, or indeed a senior member of the Crown, has the same vote as a rank and file member who pays his £100 membership every year.
Yeah. In any event, it's kind of...
Look, and that way is you can disagree with or you can agree with, but it's messy. It's politically messy.
Yeah. So where it stands at this morning is will West Streeton, light the blue touch paper and off we go, or will he not? There's talk that Ed Miliband would oppose him, put his hand up. He says, the story is reluctantly because he doesn't want to be PM. He wants to be a kingmaker. But in the absence of Burnham, the soft left really won't have a candidate if he's not there, probably.
Yes, it's a real mess. So you're saying that Starmer will survive in the immediate future? Probably, but you wouldn't be investing in him. Wouldn't be having a wager on him being Prime Minister of the UK Christmas this year.
No.
I would imagine.
Duncan McNabb put a post up this morning on Twitter saying that Malcolm Turnbull was in the Strangers Gallery this morning or last night in the Commons.
Right.
And Duncan expressed the view that he hoped he wasn't giving political advice. And I couldn't agree more, especially to his counterpart, the Conservative leader, who is the current star. She's dominating the Commons. Not that we'll get the Conservatives elected. She's like the really good player in a really bad team, and a team with a bad reputation. But she's going really well. It was a slightly less acerbic version of Paul Keating, giving the government a hiding yesterday. And to be fair, Duncan's right. There is a bit of similarity between Keir Starmer and Malcolm Turnbull. That is that they both lack judgment. And but can I just give you one line from Kemi Badenoch, which I thought was really good. She's talking about Keir Starmer, and she said, "This is a man who, faced with a crisis of vision, charisma, and electoral success, sent for Gordon Brown."
Well,
now that is a good line.
Well, quite seriously, if you compare the careers of Gordon Brown with Sir Keir Starmer, Gordon Brown wins hands down.
Yes.
At least he had some judgment.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll just finish with Andrew Neil here, Jack. So far, Starmer's efforts to save your skin have been a classic case study in how not to save your skin. That's your buddies there. All right. Well, it's time to talk sport now, Jack. I just want to turn. What did Alistair Campbell have to say? He's often very witty, Jack. He must be in a state of deep trauma at the moment.
He did have something to say.
The general election is a fair way off. The next legislative program is about to be unveiled. There are better ways to reach such an important decision, and better times too. You are MPs, not commentators who exist to feed a frenzy. He's telling everyone to cool their jets, Jack.
Well, and in that he's right. I mean, all of this really shouldn't be happening. They've got a stonking great majority, and there's not an election due for 3 years. This is, this is self-harm.
Yes, it is indeed, and we'll keep you informed as we go about that. Moving on to sport now, which we love talking about. Of course, the big story in sport this week is, certainly in AFL, is that Michael Voss has resigned, possibly been pushed. In fact, there's little doubt about that, as coach of the Carlton Footy Club. There's a couple of things I want to say about this. One of the things that we've looked at and has been shown to us is how many coaches Carlton has sacked, and they're going back 20 years. It's 6. Dennis Pagan, of course, was famously sacked. Mick Malthouse famously sacked. Brett Ratton, who was a best and fairest in a Carlton Premiership side, 1995, he was sacked.
Sack with a 50% win record.
He had a 50% win record, and that was the point I was getting to. And I also want to say that when Michael Voss took over the Carlton Footy Club, they were a mess, and I actually think he's done a really, really good job. We forget too that in 2023 they were 4 goals up in a preliminary final, a quarter time, and really got on a roll earlier on in that season, and I think put 13 or 14 wins together. Look, they are struggling this year. There's no doubt about that. We've talked about the reasons for it, but I think Michael Voss has done Carlton a great service. But I think their problems go well beyond coaching. I've said on this show a few times that their list is bottom 4 list, with the way it is. And that's with the losses of some very good players last season. One who wanted to leave, the other two handed some healthy contracts, and you can't blame any of those players for doing that. But it did leave them a little bit bereft. I guess the first question is, who'd want to coach Carlton? I honestly think the club's in reasonably good nick. I mean, they've got a good CEO, they've got a good head of football now. They need to find a new list manager as well, because the list manager was let go on the same day that Michael Voss resigned. But who'd want to coach him? The sort of the ones we're talking about: John Longmire, ex-Swans, Adam Simpson, ex-Eagles. The one that I'm hearing more and more about, Jack, is it Josh Kelly, the Geelong utility? Is it Josh or
James?
James, it is. James Kelly is supposed to be sort of the favourite at the moment. But an appointment won't be made for weeks or months. You've got an interim coach that's going to have to coach a club for 15 rounds, and I think that's a real tall order.
I think there'll be a queue around the block to coach Carlton because it's a great club. I'm not as down on their list as you are. I think Michael Voss is one of the all-time great players, and I think he did a pretty good job at Carlton. But I think there's been a problem with the game plan for a long time, which is why they can win first halves but can't sustain them. The chap who writes in The Guardian, whose name escapes me, got this right the other day, I think. He said that Michael Voss coached like he played. He was uncompromising as a player. and that's how he coached a bit as well. I think that's probably right. He said one nice little allusion he made. He said Carlton's second halves were a bit like the fight in Zaire, the Muhammad Ali fight, that the opposition knew that you could wait them out, let them wear themselves out and come off the ropes and take the prize. And I think that's right. But, the end comes for, Chris, his mate Chris Scott, his old teammate, said, no matter who you are in this game, your time will come to an end at some point. And I know Michael, and he will handle this situation with the dignity as he always does.
He's been fantastic.
But look, hats off to him for doing what he did. I don't think he was as bad as people make out, but I think there were some limitations to the game plan. And I don't think there's Brisbane aside, Brisbane who've got easily the best list. For the rest of the clubs, there isn't all that much between the various lists these days.
There's a bottom 3 or 4 that are clearly struggling for a range of reasons. Essendon are struggling, and their rebuild is kind of wavering. Richmond are right in the middle of a rebuild at the moment. So that means you've got a lot of young players running around who, and this is happening at Richmond, and we can explain and understand it because these guys have not had 2, 3, 4 pre-seasons under their belt, so they just don't have the fitness to go with some of the more mature sides. But that will come. And Carlton's, I think, they're sort of midway between a rebuild and sort of consolidating their list. I think the next 15 rounds are. That's what I mean. It's hard for an interim coach to sustain because every single player on the Carlton list will be wondering if they're going to be playing with Carlton Football Club in 2027. I mean, every single person would be up for grabs, you would imagine.
The biggest difference for me between the top half dozen sides and the bottom half dozen sides has been the same for 20 years. The top half dozen sides make players better and the bottom half dozen sides don't. So they start with the same kind of degree of talent, but the top clubs actually make players better players.
Oh, I think there are lots of problems, right, with the AFL at the moment, particularly around the draft. Now, they've got new plans for the draft which have displeased virtually everybody. The father and son rule will go. These things work. Look, it had to be dealt with because it is going to wait. It's almost sort of you're creating a sort of multi-generational force, where your good players that won you a premiership 20 years later or 25 years later have kids and those kids turn up playing for you and they're good players too. I think there's a lot of sort of structural imbalance around the AFL, and they're not doing a lot to fix that. That's not to say Carlton, I think, are in the midst of being not too far. I know they're sniffing around Amati, the Sydney tall forward, who might be looking for an opportunity, and they definitely need another tall forward. They are in the position where then their next year is kind of laid out for them. So Cody Walker will be their first draft pick, and he's playing in the twos at the moment. I had a bit of a chance to look at him play, and he's going to be a great player. So they'll have Cody Walker, Jager Smith. The veterans will be like the Sam Walshes. They'll need a ruckman soon. They'll need to deal with that. They need a power forward. But I think their peripheral players are if you want to call them that, they're actually, it's not a bad list at all. Where they just miss a ruckman, miss a tall forward, and probably miss just another certainty in the back half. But the other one I wanted to throw into that list is Harry Dean. So father and son pickup. So those are they'll build the future around these guys. And I don't think they're that far away. I think they're probably 2 or 3 years away from having the sort of list that they want to Yes, it's just very sad for Michael Voss. Some of us Carlton fans remember what he did, gave us all a bit of hope in 2023. Got us thinking about grand finals and what have you. But his record as a Carlton coach out of the last 6 or 7, it's at least as good as anyone's, including Brett Ratton, who I think everyone would say his sacking was regrettable and unnecessary.
Anyway, the two big improvements this year, Melbourne and North for mine. They were, this time last year, they were 15th and 17th and didn't look like beating anyone who was a good side. And this year, I think
Melbourne's got some new personnel, and they've clearly lost some really good players. So they've been actually able to say, all right, we will lose this sort of midfield strength. They won the premiership on the basis of that midfield strength. And we're going to let these guys go. One's playing at the Giants, the other one at the Gold Coast Suns. So it's not just about list, because they play a different brand of footy now.
Yeah, well, this is if you want to go back to Carlton, this is the problem, that they're actually playing a game that can last the whole game and not fall apart. In fact, that's true of North as well. They're both playing really attractive footy. I don't know whether you saw the North v Sydney game, but that was a cracker. Really high standard. Not quite as good as the Hawthorn Fremantle game, but just about.
Look, Sydney just showed their strength and just pulled away in the last quarter.
But North are really, really good. They've spent 20 years in the bottom 4, and they are now really, really good.
Yeah, they've still got a few holes to fill, but their midfield is as deep and as good as pretty much everybody else's. And it's great to see. Great to see him picking up. Melbourne have got new personnel in key areas, and they're playing a better brand of football, and that is that run, corridor run, link up with handball, move the ball quickly into your forward line, which is the way it's all done now. But for me, I'm looking at Sydney. They seem to be a really talented side, but Bodgy, Fremantle are good. Who did they dust up last week? And it was just they were struggling for a while. They were behind, and then they just kicked into gear. They really don't have too many gaps at all that I can see. They look like the grand finalists at this stage for mine. And in NRL, Jack. More not so much a coach resignation, but a coach succession plan with the successor not known yet, and that's at Penrith, of course, with their premiership coach, multiple premiership coach, deciding to stand down. He will stand down at the end of 27. It all looks very orderly compared to the AFL, Jack.
Yeah, a bit odd, but there you go.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because he said he doesn't want to coach against Penrith. So he said he will offer, he will stay in the game, but he won't be coaching. And of course he's coaching the side that are on top at the moment and look raging premiership favourites. Warriors are going really well too. It's always good to see rugby league going well in New Zealand. Roosters going well. Rabbits going really well too. The club I want to talk about was the Bulldogs, who they had another shocker. Now they had a reasonably good season last season. Their strength was their defence. They brought in some outside runners and some attacking players, but it hasn't really worked out, Jack. And they sit currently 13th, long season, of course, with just the 4 wins. And this leads me on to my analysis that maybe Gus Gould is not exactly what you want coming into your club. That it won't necessarily I mean, really, it was only when he was gone that Penrith started moving up. He had done a lot of work in junior development and so forth, but I still don't understand why Gus Gould is considered to be a sort of god figure in the game.
That kind of role, the football
General
manager
manager,
role,
football.
can be really important. But there are relatively few people who seem to be able to do it well. Here's an idea for Carlton, mate. Go out and get Neil Baum to be your football manager for a while. He seemed to have the genius
Might
of
be a little bit old for that now, mate. He's still sniffing. I think he's still he's at Collingwood, isn't he?
No. He was at Collingwood first, then Geelong, and during the premiership years, and then back to Collingwood for theirs, I think. But I think he's retired. He went to Richmond. He was there for the 3 premierships in Richmond.
So I meant to say, I think he's still got some position at Richmond. But, look, I don't know.
But there are relatively few. What I'm saying is there are relatively few people who have that sort of character and gravitas who can carry off that role. Not many.
Carlton have the Port veteran. He fills that sort of role. But when you're talking about general managers of football and so forth, it's a lot more than just a bloke who goes around patting people on the arse. Not saying Neil Baum did that. I played footy with his cousin Craig, who was a really good footballer, not quite as good as Neil, but lovely family, really nice people, really, really nice people. All right, well, that takes on Premier League. We've got to very quickly touch on the Premier League. It's still up for grabs, but I think Arsenal are going to make it. They got 2 more games. They had a win on the weekend, rather controversial one, Jack. I don't know if you saw it.
I did.
West Ham scored and it was disallowed. And that caused a bit of a ruckus. And, of course, it would have knocked the guts out of West Ham because, just winning that point, that just to get the draw, get the point, probably would have put them up above Tottenham Hotspur and maybe just a little bit of breathing room on relegation, but it looks like they're in the gun too. When you look at the sides that Spurs and West Ham have to play, you would say West Ham are odds-on favourites to be relegated.
Probably.
And similarly, Arsenal and Man City. Man City got 3 to go. I think, who are they playing? They've got Bournemouth, and their last 2 games are Bournemouth and Aston Villa. And both those are troublesome games. And that's why I think Arsenal will hold the cup up. They're still in Europe too, Arsenal. And they're in the final. They're playing PSG in Budapest, Jack.
They are
in the Champions Trophy. So there you go. All right.
Just before we go, a little bit of cricket. England men's, as they're now known. The England cricket side has been named for the first test against. I can't remember who. Pretty much. From the last summer, it's a couple of new bowlers because I think
Ollie Robinson's back.
The big West Indian is in the IPL. Zach Crawley is not on the list. And he won't play. There'll be the rest of the batting. The rest of the batting will be as in Australia, except that Amelia O'Gay, about whom I know nothing yet, has been named to open.
Don't know that name, but it was always thought that Zach Crawley would be the sacrificial lamb for the Farrah.
He was, yes.
Here. Look, he wasn't the only bloke who let him down.
No, that's
so
right.
It is a bit rough, but I think they've looked at him overall, not just in Australia, and thought, well, you're averaging low 30s and you get out of it
averages
too
30
early too often.
He averages 31 in Test cricket, and the reason I know that 31 in Test cricket, and the reason I know that because I saw Mike Atherton make a comment that he was averaging in the 30s, and I thought, hang on, Mike, you averaged in the 30s, but he was 38
It was
or 30,
maybe 30, 37, 38.
38, something
31
like that.
as an opener. No.
And he was a great player. Was Mark Atherton for a 38 average?
Yeah,
He was terrific.
imagine sending Zach Crawley out and say, "Can you just bat for a day and a half, please?" And
It's not going to happen. Yeah, the other news was that Marcus North is now the selector for England.
Is he?
Yes, as of this morning.
Test player as well. All right. Well, yes, I haven't been watching the English cricket stuff. Is Ollie Robinson back of the bowlers? They're saying he's the best bowler in county cricket. And the other one, who's probably not far away, is the retiree, Jack.
Jimmy Anderson.
Jimmy Anderson's taking wickets for fun, and I think he's got them at about 15 or 16 at the moment.
Yeah. And
you just still got to ask yourself, gee, would he get a game for England? Is he better bowl than Ollie Robinson? Yeah, definitely is. But look, there's a big difference now between county cricket and test cricket, and that might see him out. But look, definitely he was retired out too early, and still a class act. All right. Well, that does take us out, and we want to thank you for listening to our budget / Starmer shock disgrace episode, and we encourage you to weigh in whenever you want to. Drop us a line. You know how to get hold of us by now, and we'll be back next week where we're going to have a look at the Royal Commission into anti-Semitism and social cohesion. Thanks, folks. See you next week.